The bell above the door chimed softly as another customer entered Pages and Dreams bookstore. Celeste Morgan looked up from the accounting ledger that spelled nothing but trouble and forced a welcoming smile onto her face. The smile froze. The man who stood in the doorway was tall and imposing, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit that spoke of wealth beyond measure. But it was his face that made her breath catch. The left side was handsome enough, with sharp features and piercing green eyes. The right side told a different story entirely. Burn scars twisted the skin into a landscape of pain, pulling down the corner of his mouth and eye, turning what might have been beauty into something that made people look away. Vincent Ashford had grown accustomed to the reactions, the quick intake of breath, the widening eyes, the polite excuses people suddenly remembered they needed to be somewhere else. He waited for this woman to follow the script that had been written for him 5 years ago, when the laboratory fire had stolen half his face and all his faith in human kindness. But Celeste Morgan did something unexpected.
After
that first moment of surprise, her expression softened into something genuine. Not pity, which he despised, but simple human recognition. "Welcome to Pages and Dreams," she said warmly. "Can I help you find something special today?" Vincent found himself momentarily speechless. Her voice carried the melody of someone who truly loved what they did. She was perhaps 30, with chestnut hair pulled back in a messy bun and wearing a cardigan that had seen better days. Paint stains dotted her jeans, and there was a smudge of dust on her cheek. She looked tired, but not defeated. "I am searching for first editions," he said, his voice rough from disuse. He spoke little these days, conducting most business through emails and video calls where he could control the camera angle, particularly anything by obscure philosophers from the 1800s. Celeste's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "Oh, you have excellent taste. We have a collection in the rare books section upstairs. My grandfather spent 40 years gathering them."
how
She moved out from behind the counter with an easy grace, not hurrying past him or maintaining careful distance like most people did. She simply walked beside him toward the narrow staircase at the back of the shop, talking about books with infectious enthusiasm. The upstairs room was a treasure trove. Shelves lined every wall, reaching toward a skylight that bathed everything in gentle afternoon light. The smell of old paper and leather filled the air like incense in a temple. Dedicated to knowledge, Vincent felt something inside his chest unclench. He had forgotten places like this existed. For 5 years he had lived in his fortress of steel and glass, conducting his technology empire from behind screens and through intermediaries. He had told himself he preferred the isolation. Standing in this room filled with the accumulated wisdom of centuries, he realized he had been lying. "This section here," Celeste said, running her fingers along a row of spines with obvious affection, "contains some real gems. We have a first edition of Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Representation, and here a collection of essays by Skrin Kierkegaard that most people have never heard of." "You know your philosophy," Vincent observed. She shrugged with a self-deprecating smile. "My grandfather believed that running a bookstore required more than just selling. He said we were custodians of human thought. Every book that passed through our hands deserved to be understood and appreciated." "He sounds like a wise man." He was. A shadow crossed her face. "He passed away 6 months ago. Left me this place and more debt than I knew existed." Vincent glanced around the room with new understanding. Now he noticed the water stain on one corner of the ceiling, the slight sag in one shelf, the worn carpet. This bookstore was dying, and this woman was fighting to keep it alive. "These editions you have," he said carefully, "they are quite valuable. You could sell them to collectors for substantial sums." Celeste's jaw tightened. "I could, but my grandfather did not collect them as investments. He gathered them because he believed knowledge should be accessible, not locked away in private vaults. As long as I can avoid it, these books will stay here where readers can find them." There was steel beneath her gentleness. Vincent found himself intrigued in a way he had not been intrigued by another person in years. He spent 2 hours in that upstairs room, pulling books from shelves and discussing their contents with Celeste. She had read widely and thought deeply. Her insights were fresh and unencumbered by academic pretension. When she disagreed with his interpretations, She did so with respect, but without backing down. Not once did her gaze linger on his scars, with disgust or morbid curiosity. She looked him in the eyes when she spoke, treating him like a person rather than a monster or an object of pity. When he finally selected 3 rare volumes, she carefully wrapped each one in brown paper with the tenderness of someone saying goodbye to old friends. "Will you come back?" she asked as she handed him the package. The question surprised him. Most people hoped he would not return. "Would you like me to?" Now the words came out more vulnerable than he intended. Celeste smiled, and it transformed her tired face into something luminous. "Of course, it is rare to meet someone who loves books the way you do. Besides, I think we were in the middle of an argument about whether Nietzsche was a nihilist or a life affirmer. I am not finished winning that debate." Vincent felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. It had been so long since he had smiled that the movement felt foreign. "You have not won. You have merely delayed your inevitable defeat." "We shall see about that, Mr. Ashford." Vincent Ashford. If she recognized the name belonging to one of the most powerful technology moguls in the country, she gave no sign. She simply extended her hand. "Celeste Morgan, I look forward to our next philosophical battle." Her handshake was firm and warm. When Vincent stepped back out onto the San Francisco street, the city seemed somehow brighter than it had in 5 long years. Behind him, Celeste watched through the window as he climbed into a sleek black car. Only when he had driven away did she sink into the chair behind the counter, her hands shaking slightly. She had recognized him the moment he walked in. Vincent Ashford, the reclusive genius whose company had revolutionized artificial intelligence. The man whose tragic accident had turned him into an urban legend. She had also seen something else in his guarded eyes. Loneliness so profound it made her own struggles seem small. Celeste looked around her grandfather's bookstore, at the shelves, full of stories about human connection and courage. Maybe, she thought, it was time to live one of those stories herself. 3 days later, the bell chimed again, and Vincent Ashford returned. Vincent Ashford found himself doing something he had not done in 5 years. He was developing a routine that involved another person. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, he would leave his headquarters early, something his assistant noted, with barely concealed shock, and drive 2 pages in Dream's bookstore. At first he told himself it was simply about the books. Celeste had access to rare editions that even his unlimited resources struggled to locate. But by the 3rd week, he had to admit the truth. It was about her. Celeste never flinched when she looked at him. She never offered empty platitudes about how the scars did not matter or artificial compliments, clearly designed to make him feel better. She simply treated him like a person, argued with him about literature and philosophy, and occasionally threw wadded-up paper at his head when his arrogance about his interpretations became unbearable. "You cannot seriously believe that. Kafka intended the Metamorphosis to be about capitalism," she said one afternoon, gesturing dramatically with a dusty copy of the novella. "It is clearly about alienation and the human condition." "Everything is about capitalism if you look closely enough," Vincent countered, enjoying the fire in her eyes when she was passionate about something. Gregor Samsa becomes useless to his family when he cannot work. That is the entire point. The entire point is that he was never valued as a person, only as a provider. That transcends economic systems. Does it, though? Without the economic pressure, would his family have rejected him? Celeste opened her mouth to respond, then paused. "That is actually a fair question. I hate when you make fair points." Vincent felt that unfamiliar smile tugging at his mouth again. "Careful, Celeste. It almost sounded like you were conceding." "I might be right," I said. "You made a fair point. It is very different from being right." These moments had become the highlight of his weeks, but he was not blind to the reality around them. Each time he visited, he noticed new signs of the bookstore's decline. A shelf that had been full was now half empty. The heating system clanked and wheezed. One day he arrived to find Celeste on a ladder, trying to patch a leak in the roof with duct tape and determination. "That is not a permanent solution," he observed. "Nothing is permanent," she replied, without looking down. "But temporary sometimes lasts long enough." Her optimism was both admirable and heartbreaking. Vincent had run the numbers in his head. Based on the foot traffic he observed and the condition of the building, Pages and Dreams had perhaps 3 months before bankruptcy became inevitable. That evening, he made a decision that felt both necessary and terrifying. He would make her an offer, not charity, which he knew she would refuse, but a genuine business proposition that would benefit them both. The following Tuesday, he arrived with a leather portfolio. Celeste looked up from helping a young student find poetry collections, her face brightening when she saw him. "Vincent, perfect timing. I found something you need to see." She finished with the student, then led him upstairs to the rare books room. From behind a locked cabinet, she produced a slim volume bound in faded blue cloth. First edition of Emerson's Nature, published in 1836. My grandfather kept it hidden because he knew if word got out, collectors would never leave. Him alone, Vincent took the book with reverent hands. It was exquisite, a piece of history that belonged in a museum. "Celeste, this is worth at least $50,000, possibly more." I know, her voice was quiet. "I've been inventorying the collection, trying to figure out which pieces I can bear to part with to pay the debts. There is another option." He set the book down carefully and opened his portfolio. "I want to propose something. I need a private library curator, someone who understands not just the monetary value of books, but their intellectual and historical significance. I have been acquiring collections for years, but they sit in climate-controlled storage because I do not have anyone I trust to properly organize and care for them." Celeste's expression became guarded. "Vincent, I appreciate the thought, but I cannot accept charity disguised as employment." "It is not charity. Look at the proposal." She took the documents he offered and began reading. Her eyes widened as she scanned the details. He was offering her a substantial salary to curate his private collection, which according to the inventory list was extensive and impressive. More importantly, part of the arrangement included purchasing Pages and Dreams and renovating it, keeping it open as a community bookstore, while removing the financial burden from her shoulders. "This is too much," she said, shaking her head. "Vincent, you would be spending millions to help me. That is the definition of charity. Read the entire contract," he said firmly. "You would be working for me." The bookstore would become a branch of the Ashford Foundation, providing community education programs and literary resources. It is a legitimate business venture that serves the foundation's mission. He would have full creative control, but would also have responsibilities and accountability. Celeste read through the pages more slowly this time. He could see her mind working, looking for the catch, the hidden cost. Vincent understood her hesitation. His own experiences had taught him that generosity often came with invisible strings attached. "Why?" she finally asked. "Could hire any number of qualified curators, people with degrees and credentials I do not have. Why me?" Vincent looked at her directly, letting her see the truth in his eyes. "Because you understand something most experts do not. Books are not commodities or status symbols. They are conversations across time. Talk about authors like they are old friends. You recommend books based on what people need, not what will impress them. That cannot be taught in universities." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the contract. "If I agree to this, it cannot be because you feel sorry for me. I need to know this is real, that you truly value what I bring." "I do not do things out of pity," Vincent said, and there was an edge to his voice now. "I have been pitied enough. For both of us. I am making you this offer because I believe you are extraordinarily talented, and because my collection deserves someone who will treat it the way your grandfather treated his. Also, selfishly, I would like to continue our arguments about literature. That becomes difficult if you are too busy trying to save a sinking ship." A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. "You really are terrible at expressing emotion. In a healthy way, I am aware. Do we have an agreement?" Celeste took a deep breath, then extended her hand. "We have an agreement. But I am going to win our next argument about Kafka to establish dominance in this new professional relationship." "You can certainly try." The handshake lingered a moment longer than necessary. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of a connection that had grown beyond books and philosophy. into something neither was quite ready to name. Over the following weeks, Celeste began splitting her time between renovating Pages and Dreams and organizing Vincent's collection at his estate. The first time she visited his home, stunning modern structure of glass and stone perched in the hills overlooking the bay, she understood something new about him. Every room was beautiful and sterile. The furniture was expensive, but arranged. For aesthetics rather than comfort. There were no personal photographs, no mementos, nothing that spoke of a life being lived rather than merely endured. It was a fortress designed to keep the world at a safe distance. "You live like a ghost," she said quietly as they stood in his vast library. Surrounded by thousands of volumes that had never been properly organized or, she suspected, read, Vincent stiffened. "I live like someone who values privacy and order. You live like someone who stopped believing they deserved warmth." She turned to face him, her expression gentle but unflinching. "Vincent, what happened to you was terrible, but you survived. Surviving means living, not just existing. You do not understand." His voice was tight with emotion he rarely allowed. "To surface, people look at me and see a monster. I have learned to accept that. It's this house, this distance. It protects me from their disgust." "I look at you and see a person," Celeste countered. "A brilliant, complicated, occasionally infuriating. A person who uses sarcasm as armor and isolation as a shield. The scars on your face are just scars. It's the ones you have built around your heart are far more damaging." For a moment, Vincent looked genuinely angry. Then, slowly, the anger crumbled into something raw. The fire happened at a company celebration. I went back into the building to help others escape. When I came out, people were horrified. Not grateful, horrified. The woman I was engaged to broke things off 3 days later because she could not bear to look at me. She said she was sorry, but she had to think of the children we might have someday. We did not want them to be afraid of their own father. Celeste felt tears sting her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Then she was a coward who never deserved you in the first place. Or she was honest about what everyone else was too polite to say no. Celeste stepped closer, looking up at him. "She was wrong, and you were wrong to let her poison your view of yourself." They stood in silence, the afternoon light streaming. Through the windows, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. Vincent felt something crack inside his chest, a wall he had spent 5 years building, beginning to crumble. "I do not know how to do this," he admitted quietly. "How to be around people again. How to trust that their kindness is real." "You start small," Celeste said. "You let one person in, then maybe another. You remember that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the only way to truly live." She reached out and gently touched his scarred hand. He did not pull away. 3 months passed, like pages turning in a beloved book. The renovation of Pages and Dreams was complete, transformed into something that honored its past while embracing its future. The community responded with overwhelming support. Local students gathered for reading groups. Elderly neighbors found a warm place to spend their afternoons. Now the bookstore became what Celeste's grandfather had always dreamed it could be, sanctuary for minds and hearts. But the real transformation was happening in Vincent Ashford. He had started attending the bookstore's evening events. At first, he would arrive late and stand in the shadows, listening to poetry readings and author discussions from a safe distance. Then one night, Celeste called on him to share his thoughts on a novel they had both read. And he found himself speaking to a room full of strangers about literature and meaning. The audience listened. Some stared at his scars, but their attention was captured more by his words than his appearance. When he finished, an elderly woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "My husband had burned scars from the war. He hid from the world until the day he died. I wish he could have heard you tonight. Maybe he would have understood that he was always more than his wounds." Vincent felt something shift inside him, a loosening of the chains he had wrapped around his own heart. Celeste watched these moments with quiet joy. She saw him slowly coming back to life, like a plant that had been kept in darkness, finally reaching toward the sun. But she also felt something more complicated growing inside her own chest. Something that went beyond friendship or professional. Respect. She was falling in love with Vincent Ashford. It terrified her, not because of his appearance, but because she knew the depth of his wounds. She worried that he might never truly believe someone could love him. He would always suspect her feelings were born of pity or some misguided savior complex. One evening, after closing the bookstore, they sat together in the upstairs books room. Rain drummed against the skylight, creating a cocoon of sound around them. They had been debating the nature of love as portrayed in classic literature, but the conversation had grown more personal. "Do you believe in love?" Celeste asked suddenly. "Real love, not the romantic fantasy version we see in movies?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, turning a first edition of poetry over in his hands. "I used to. Before the fire, I thought I had found it. Afterwards, I learned that what I thought was love was actually contingent on conditions I could no longer meet. That was not love then. Love is not a contract with clauses about physical appearance or social acceptability. What is it then?" He looked at her directly, and she saw vulnerability in his eyes that made her breath catch. "It is choosing someone," she said carefully, "not despite their flaws, but including them. It is seeing all of someone, the light and the shadow, and deciding they are worth the risk of being hurt. It is terrifying and beautiful and complicated. You make it sound simple." "I make it sound true." She hesitated, then decided to take the leap. "Vincent, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it without immediately dismissing it as pity or delusion." His body tensed. "Celeste, do not what? Do not be honest. You were the one who valued truth. It's not this. Truth. Not when it will change everything between us. Everything is already changed." She moved closer, her heart pounding. "I have fallen in love with you. Not with some imagined version of who you were before the fire. With you exactly as you are now. Your brilliance and your stubbornness, your dry humor and your wounded heart. The way you touch books like they are sacred. The way you have started smiling again when you think no one is watching." Vincent stood abruptly, turning away from her. "You do not know what you are saying. You have spent months taking care of a broken thing, and you have confused compassion with love. Do not tell me what I feel." There was steel in her voice now. "I am not some naive romantic. I have had my heart broken. I know the difference between kindness and love. And I know that I want to wake up tomorrow and argue with you about whether Hemingway was overrated. I want to watch you slowly learn to trust the world again. I want to be there when you finally believe you deserve happiness. I cannot give you what you deserve." His voice was rough with emotion. "Should be with someone whole, someone who can take you to dinners without people staring, someone whose face does not frighten children." Celeste walked around to face him, refusing to let him hide. "I deserve someone who challenges me intellectually, who makes me laugh, who understands that books are not just objects, but portals too. Human experience. I deserve someone brave enough to keep living, even after life tried to break them. That person is you, Vincent, only you. People will judge you. They will say terrible things about why you are with me. Let them. Their opinions mean nothing compared to how I feel when I am with you." Vincent looked at her, really looked at her, and saw no deception in her eyes. Only truth, and something that looked dangerously like love. He wanted to believe her. The wanting was so intense it felt like a physical ache. "I am afraid," he admitted, the words barely a whisper. "Afraid that you will wake up one day and realize you made a mistake, that you will look at me the way she did, with regret and revulsion." Celeste reached up and gently touched his face, her fingers tracing the scarred skin with tenderness. He flinched at first, then held still, letting her touch the parts of himself he had hidden from the world. "These scars tell a story of courage," she said softly. "You ran into fire to save others. That is who you are beneath everything." "I am not her. I will never be her. I choose you, Vincent. Every complicated, brilliant, scarred part of you." Something broke open inside him then. All the walls, all the carefully constructed defenses, came crashing down. He pulled her close, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had become untethered. "I do not know how to do this," he said against her hair. "How to be loved, how how to believe I am worthy of it. We will figure it out together. That is what love is. To people learning each other's language. They stood there in the quiet bookstore, surrounded by 1,000 stories of human connection, and began writing their own. The weeks that followed were not easy. Vincent had been right about one thing. People did judge. When they appeared together at a charity gala, whispers followed, them like shadows. Cameras flashed. The next day, tabloid headlines speculated about their relationship with cruel curiosity. Celeste read one particularly vicious article and felt rage boil in her chest. They are calling you my charity case, suggesting I am with you to gain access to your wealth. Vincent, who had learned to ignore such things, simply shrugged. Let them think what they want. No. She set down her phone with deliberate force. I will not let them reduce what we have to some mercenary transaction. She spent the next hour drafting a response, which she posted on the bookstore's social media. It was honest and fierce, talking about what real love looked like, about seeing people for who they truly were, rather than surface appearances. She talked about Vincent's kindness, his intelligence, his slow journey back to trusting the world. The post went viral. Thousands of people responded with their own stories of loving someone the world did not understand. Messages poured in from people with visible differences, from those who had been judged and found wanting by society's narrow standards. Pages and dreams became a symbol of something larger than itself. Vincent read the messages with tears in his eyes. You did not have to do this. You did not have to expose our private life to defend me. Yes, I did, Celeste said firmly, because you were worth defending. And because maybe someone else out there needs to hear that they are worthy of love too, regardless of what the mirror shows them. That evening, Vincent made a decision. He had been working on a project in secret, something that combined his technological expertise with the lessons Celeste had taught him about human connection. He revealed it to her over dinner at his home, which had slowly been transformed from a sterile fortress into a space that felt lived in and warm. I am creating a foundation, he explained, showing her the plans on his tablet. It will provide resources for burn survivors. It's not just medical support, but psychological counseling, social reintegration programs, and opportunities for meaningful work. Too many people go through what I went through and never find their way back. I want to build bridges for them. Celeste looked at the detailed plans, seeing how he had thought of everything. This is incredible, Vincent. This could change thousands of lives. You changed mine, he said simply.
I want
To pass that gift forward. She kissed him then, tasting salt from tears she had not realized were falling. I am so proud of you. 6 months later, Pages and Dreams hosted a celebration. The Ashford Foundation was officially launching its support programs for survivors. The bookstore had become the Foundation's community center, a place where people could gather, share their stories, and find resources. Vincent stood at the front of the room, looking out at the crowd. He saw faces with scars like his own, saw families and friends who loved them. He saw Celeste standing off to the side, her eyes shining with pride and love. For 5 years, he began, his voice steady, I believed my life ended the night of the fire. I survived, but I did not live. I built walls to protect myself from a world I thought would only hurt me. Then I walked into a bookstore, looking for rare philosophy, and I found something infinitely more valuable. I found someone who reminded me that being human means being vulnerable, that scars are simply evidence that we survived something that tried to break us. He looked directly at Celeste. She taught me that love is not about perfection. It is about acceptance. It is about choosing each other even when the choice is complicated, especially when the choice is complicated. The room erupted in applause. People stood, many of them crying. Vincent felt something he had not felt in years. He felt hope. That night, after everyone had gone home, Vincent and Celeste stood in the empty bookstore. The space still smelled of coffee and celebration. Lights twinkled overhead, casting warm shadows. Thank you, Vincent said, taking her hands in his, for not running away, for seeing me when I had forgotten how to see myself. Thank you for letting me in, Celeste replied. for trusting that love could be real. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring, simple and beautiful. I know this is fast. I know we have only been together for 8 months, but I have wasted enough time being afraid. Celeste Morgan, will you marry me? Will you continue arguing with me about literature and teaching me how to be human and reminding me every day that I am worthy of love? Celeste laughed through her tears. Only if you promise to always buy first editions from my bookstore and to never again claim that Hemingway was the greatest American writer, I can agree to the first condition. Second is negotiable. Then yes, I will marry you. They married 6 months later in the bookstore, surrounded by shelves of stories about human courage and connection. The ceremony was small and perfect. Vincent's employees attended, many of them people he had kept at a distance for years. They saw him now, not as a reclusive boss, but as a person who had found his way back to life. As they exchanged vows, Vincent looked at his bride and felt gratitude so profound it was almost painful. She had not saved him. He had saved himself. But she had shown him that salvation was possible, that the world still held beauty and kindness for those brave enough to seek it. Their story spread beyond San Francisco. It became a reminder that love was not about perfection or appearance. It was about seeing another person's soul and deciding it was worth the risk of opening your own heart. Years later, the Ashford Foundation would help thousands of survivors rebuild their lives. Pages and Dreams would expand into a network of community bookstores across the country. But the real legacy was simpler and more profound. It was the knowledge that no one was too broken to be loved. That scars were not endings, but evidence of survival. That sometimes the person who saves you is the one brave enough to look past the monster the world sees and recognize the human beneath. Vincent and Celeste built a life together that was messy and beautiful and real. They continued to argue about literature. They created programs that gave others hope. And every night, before they fell asleep, Vincent would thank whatever force in the universe had led him into that bookstore on a day when he was looking for rare philosophy and found instead the rarest thing of all, someone who loved him not, despite his scars, but including all of them. Someone who taught him that the greatest courage was not running into fires to save others, but allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to accept love when it was freely offered. Their story proved that fairy tales could be real, not because dragons were slain or curses were broken, but because two imperfect people chose each other and built something true from that choice. And in the end, that was the only magic that mattered. The end.